My folks ditched me in foster care when I was 10 so they could go off and travel with my sister. Now they're broke, desperate, and crawling back to me. So I gave them exactly what they had coming. Name's Jake. I'm 26 today, but this all kicked off more than a decade ago, back when I was just a kid. At the time, I thought we were a pretty typical family, or at least what I assumed normal looked like. We didn't have stacks of money, but we had a solid house, decent clothes, and life felt steady enough. My parents, Denise and Martin, never showed any signs that something was wrong. That is, until everything went sideways. Then there was my sister, Lily. She was the favorite. You know the kind I mean. Every teacher adored her, and my parents wouldn't shut up about how amazing she was. If Lily coughed, it was like someone painted the Mona Lisa. Me? I was just Jake. I wasn't a troublemaker or anything like that, but no matter how hard I tried, it felt like I was just background static. Lily's doodles got the prime real estate on the fridge. I got a quick, nice job, Jake, and a pat on the back. The thing is, I didn't blame Lily. It wasn't her fault she got treated like a prize while I was more like an afterthought. Still, it made me feel like I didn't count. Anyway, the day everything unraveled started off like any other. I was chilling in my room, messing around with some old action figures I wasn't ready to part with yet. Then I heard Denise calling me downstairs. She used that strained, overly calm voice parents get when they're trying to sound normal, but you can tell something's off. I figured I'd left the milk out or forgot to take out the trash. But when I stepped into the living room, I saw both of them sitting on the couch, way too serious for it to be about chores. "Sit down, Jake," Martin said, pointing to the chair across from them. His voice was sharp, like we were about to have a business meeting instead of a family talk. Denise looked like she was trying to seem gentle, but it felt fake. I sat there, completely confused. Denise inhaled deeply and said, "Jake, we need to talk about something important." My first thought was that maybe a distant relative had passed away, someone I barely remembered. But then Martin added, "We've been going through some financial difficulties, and we just can't afford to take care of you anymore." At first, I thought I'd misheard. "What do you mean, you can't afford me? Like I'm some magazine subscription you're canceling?" I just stared at them, trying to wrap my head around what was happening. But Denise kept going. "This isn't your fault, sweetie. We've been struggling for a while and had to make a very difficult choice." A choice? Seriously? They talked about it like they were picking between streaming services, not deciding to give up their son. I asked them what the hell they meant, still clinging to hope that maybe I'd misunderstood. Denise started explaining how they'd arranged for me to stay with a foster family. She kept throwing around the word temporary, like that was supposed to make me feel better. I couldn't help it. I blurted out, "Why can't Lily go instead?" Her face froze for a split second. Then she said, "Lily's in school, Jake. She needs consistency. Stability." Like I didn't? Martin jumped in before I could argue. "This isn't about picking favorites. It's just what makes the most sense right now." I broke down. Not quiet tears, full-blown, gut-wrenching sobs. How else is a 10-year-old supposed to react when his own parents say they're done raising him? Denise leaned in to hug me, but I shoved her away. I kept asking why, again and again, but all I got were the same rehearsed lines about tough times and hard decisions. The next morning, they packed up a small bag and drove me to the foster home. The drive was dead silent. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind where you can practically hear the tension crackling in the air. I kept staring at them, just waiting for one of them to crack, to turn around and say, "This was a mistake. Come back home." But that moment never came. When we pulled up to the house, I didn't get out right away. I stayed in the car, hoping, begging, really, that they'd change their minds. Martin looked over his shoulder and said, "Come on, Jake. Let's get this over with," like dropping me off was just another item on his to-do list. I climbed out, clutching the small duffel bag they'd packed, and followed them up the walkway. The foster couple, Tom and Susan, were waiting at the door. They looked kind enough, but I barely noticed them. All I could focus on was the crushing realization that my own parents were about to walk away from me. Denise crouched down in front of me and said, "We love you, Jake. This isn't forever. Just give it some time, okay?" She kissed my forehead, but it didn't feel like love. It felt like someone slapping a return to sender label on my heart. Martin? He didn't even hug me. He shook my hand, like I was some distant family friend, not his own kid. And then they left. I stood on the porch, watching their car shrink into the distance, feeling this heavy, suffocating weight in my chest. I kept whispering to myself, "They'll come back. They have to." But they never did. That night, I kept replaying everything in my mind, over and over. What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I good enough? Why did they pick Lily and not me? Those questions stuck with me like a knot in my stomach. And the worst part? I had no answers. All I had were their promises that it was temporary. And as much as I wanted to hold on to that, something deep inside told me this was permanent, that I'd been cut loose. Looking back now, I know that was the moment everything shifted. It wasn't just that they left me, it was how they did it. Like I was some burden they were relieved to finally unload. But back then, at 10, I didn't have the words for that kind of betrayal. All I knew was my parents drove away, and I was completely alone. Tom and Susan, to their credit, tried to help me settle in over the next few days. Every morning, Susan made pancakes like it was part of some quiet ritual. Tom would occasionally poke his head into my room, tossing out random trivia like, "Did you know octopuses have 3 hearts?" They were clearly trying to make me feel at home. I could see that. But no matter how hard they tried, I couldn't bring myself to trust them. Or anyone, really. I was holding on to the one thing I had left, my parents' promise that this was only temporary. I clung to those words like a life raft, repeating them in my head. They'll call, I told myself. They'll explain everything. Any day now. But days blurred into weeks, and weeks stretched into years. Still nothing. No call. No letter. Just silence. It wasn't until I started back at school that the weight of it all really hit me. The other kids noticed I was new and, naturally, started asking questions. Where'd you move from? Why'd you come here? I couldn't tell them the truth, so I lied, said my parents were working out of state. Just temporary. Nothing serious. Even saying it felt wrong. Like metal in my mouth. I hated lying, but I hated the truth even more. One afternoon after school, I was curled up on Tom and Susan's couch, ignoring my homework and scrolling through my phone. That's when I made a mistake that would wreck me. I looked up my parents online. I didn't even know what I was hoping to find. Some sign they still thought about me. Some hint I still mattered. Instead, it felt like a punch to the gut. There they were, grinning on some tropical beach, ocean behind them, looking like they didn't have a single care in the world. The caption read, "Finally living our dream life." My stomach turned. I kept scrolling. Photo after photo, sunsets, champagne, luxury resorts. And Lily. Always Lily. Smiling like the star of the show, center stage in every picture. The caption stung worse than the images. Our amazing daughter. Like I'd never even existed. The more I scrolled, the more my chest burned. These were the same people who said they couldn't afford to keep me, and now they were out living like vacation influencers. And Lily? She hadn't been sent to foster care. She was right there with them, living the dream. They hadn't just left me behind. They'd erased me. But the worst part wasn't the pictures. It was the blog. Yeah, they had a whole travel blog. Glossy, smug, full of self-righteous ramblings about their path to freedom. In one post, they said shedding material things had brought them peace. Material things. That's what I was to them. Something they let go of to find themselves. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A comment from an account with no profile picture, just a blank gray circle, said, "Must be nice running away and leaving everything behind. Hope it doesn't catch up to you." It sliced through their picture-perfect life like a knife. I stared at it, heart pounding. Was that about me or something else? I clicked the profile. Private. No posts. Just that gray circle, staring back. I scrolled further. A few pictures down, I found one of Denise holding a tropical cocktail. Another comment. Guess skipping town was worth it after all. My chest tightened. Skipping town. Who writes that like it's casual? I searched the rest of the comments, but most were praise, people calling them inspiring, thanking them for living authentically. I wanted to scream. How could no one see through it? And I couldn't let it go. Were those just internet trolls? Or was there something darker going on? I already knew my parents were capable of lying. But was there more to the story? Something they hadn't told anyone? The questions wouldn't stop swirling. I sat there, staring at the screen, hands trembling. I had no way to find out. No access to their past. No answers. Just the truth no one else seemed to see. Finally, I slammed the laptop shut, my whole body buzzing. It wasn't just the lies. It was how unbothered they looked, living their fantasy, while I was left behind, trying to survive without them. That night, over dinner, Tom and Susan could tell something was off. I wasn't hiding it well. "You all right, Jake?" Tom asked, setting his fork down, concern written all over his face. I shrugged. Yeah, but it came out flat. Empty. Susan wasn't one to let things slide. "You don't have to talk," she said gently, But if something's weighing on you, we're here. I looked at them, two people who barely knew me, but somehow seemed to care more than my parents ever had, and something inside cracked. I told them everything. The blog, the photos, the captions that made me feel invisible. I expected them to brush it off, to say it didn't matter. But they didn't. Susan just listened, her eyes warm with a quiet kind of empathy I still wasn't used to. And Tom, he looked like he wanted to punch a hole in the wall. "You've got every right to be angry," he said. "What they did, that's on them. Don't let anyone, especially yourself, make you feel like it's your fault." It wasn't a long speech, but it hit harder than anything. For the first time, someone saw the weight I'd been dragging around. They didn't try to fix it. They just saw it. And somehow, that mattered more than I can explain. Over the next few weeks, I started to settle in with Tom and Susan. Not perfectly, and not all at once. But something inside me started to shift. Tom and Susan weren't perfect, not by a long shot, but they were consistent. They asked how my day was, helped me with math problems, and nudged me to try things outside my comfort zone. And slowly, piece by piece, I started to let my guard down. I even joined a couple of clubs at school and made a few friends. But the bitterness toward my parents? That didn't fade. If anything, it burned hotter. Still, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't let the choices Martin and Denise made define who I became. So I threw myself into activities. Not because I wanted to be Mr. Popular, but because I needed something, anything, to keep my mind busy. I started with the debate team. I figured, after all those years arguing with Martin and Denise, I might as well put the skill to use. Turns out, I was good at it. Next came a part-time job. Tom had been gently pushing me, saying earning my own money might feel empowering. Eventually, I gave in and landed a job at a small bookstore downtown. It wasn't flashy, but I loved being surrounded by books, and by customers who actually wanted to talk about them. That first paycheck gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. Independence. Every time I cashed one, it felt like I was reclaiming a little more of my future, one that belonged only to me. Somewhere along the way, I met Chris. He didn't treat me like a charity case or a broken kid. He just saw me as Jake. When I told him a little about my past, he didn't get awkward. He just nodded and said, "Man, that sucks. Want to play some games?" That was it. And somehow, that made all the difference. Then one afternoon, I came home from school and instantly sensed something was off. Usually, I'd hear Susan humming in the kitchen to her oldies playlist, or Tom making noise in the garage. But this time, the house was quiet, too quiet. As I walked down the hallway, I heard muffled voices from the dining room. I paused, staying just out of sight. Should we tell him? That was Susan, her voice soft, uncertain. "He deserves to know," Tom replied. "If this has anything to do with him, we can't keep it a secret." "But he's finally doing better," she said. "Why stir things up when we don't even have the full story? The letter doesn't say much. It might not mean anything." "A letter? About me?" I froze, heart pounding. Before I could figure out how to casually walk in without looking like I'd been eavesdropping, I heard Tom say, "Okay, we'll wait. But if they reach out again, we're telling him." Footsteps approached the living room. I panicked and ducked into the kitchen, pretending I'd just walked in. Susan looked up and smiled like everything was fine. But I could feel it. Something wasn't. That night, once the house was quiet and the Millers were asleep, I went back into the dining room. I know I shouldn't have, but curiosity and fear got the better of me. I rifled through the stack of mail until I found it. An envelope, near the bottom. My name on the front. The return address? A law office. My stomach turned. I carefully opened it and started to read. The letter began, "To whom it may concern. This is a formal notice regarding unresolved financial obligations tied to Martin and Denise. Then, as the registered guardians of Jake, we are requesting any relevant documents related to the family's financial status during." I stopped reading. My hands were shaking. Debts? Was that what this was about? Had they ditched me not because they couldn't care for me, but because they were trying to outrun their own mess? I slid the letter back into the envelope and returned it to the pile, exactly where I found it. My mind was spinning. That letter changed everything. Martin and Denise hadn't just lied. They'd lied big. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. They weren't just irresponsible. They were cowards. By the time I turned 18, things had started to click. I was staying on top of school, holding down my job, keeping up with clubs, and it was finally paying off. My grades were solid, and one day my debate coach pulled me aside and said I had a real shot at a scholarship. For the first time, I let myself dream. Really dream. about a future that had nothing to do with Martin or Denise. Just me on my own terms. And then it happened. I got the letter. I'd applied for a scholarship on a whim, half convinced I didn't stand a chance. But when I opened that envelope and saw the words full ride, I thought I was dreaming. I ran downstairs, waving it like a golden ticket. Susan hugged me so hard I could barely breathe, and Tom looked like he'd just hit the jackpot. That night, I decided to post about it. I wasn't big on social media, but this felt worth sharing. I wrote something simple about hard work paying off and thanked the people who'd supported me. The comments came pouring in, friends, classmates, even teachers offering congratulations. And then came hers. Denise. She commented, "We're so proud of you, Jake. Let's reconnect soon." Proud? After everything? After disappearing, abandoning me, leaving me to patch my life back together alone? I stared at that comment for a long time, every muscle in my body tense. It wasn't just what she said, it was the tone. Casual. Like we were old friends who'd lost touch. Not a mother who'd walked away from her child. I didn't reply. What could I possibly say? Instead, I deleted the comment. Then I blocked both of them. And that was the moment it truly clicked. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their fake affection or their empty attempts to reconnect. I didn't need them. I had built something better. I had built it. On my own. Getting that scholarship lit a fire in me. It gave me a target, something bigger than just surviving each day. I dove even deeper into schoolwork, not just to prove I could do it, but, if I'm honest, maybe a little to show Martin and Denise I didn't need them to succeed. Tom started giving me bite-sized lessons on money management. I didn't expect to care much about budgeting or saving, but it stuck. He showed me how to set goals, plan ahead, even how compound interest worked. It wasn't flashy, but it gave me something I'd never had before: control. At the same time, with the Millers cheering me on, I started tutoring younger kids after school. I never saw myself as the teaching type, but I had a way of breaking things down that clicked with them. Helping kids who felt behind or invisible. That meant something. I knew exactly how that felt. One afternoon, during a tutoring session, Chris leaned back and asked, "So, what's the end game for you? Like, 5 years from now, where do you see yourself?" I paused, thought it through. "I just want to be steady, man. Have my own place, my own life. Not have to depend on anyone." He grinned. "That's legit. But don't forget to enjoy the ride, too." That stuck with me. I'd been so focused on proving I was okay, on outrunning my past, I hadn't left room for anything else. So I made a promise to keep grinding, yeah, but to start letting life in, too. I said yes more often. Game nights. Late-night milkshake runs. Weekend road trips with no real plan. I even let myself just sit at the park and do absolutely nothing. It felt weird at first, but good. Like maybe life didn't always have to be a race. By the time the year ended, I barely recognized the kid I'd been when I first arrived at the Millers. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. Tom and Susan had become my foundation. Chris was the brother I never knew I needed. And for the first time, the road ahead felt like mine. Not one I was shoved onto by someone else's choices. Sure, thoughts of my parents still crept in. That sting never fully disappeared. But it didn't define me anymore. If anything, it gave me more fuel to keep going. Then graduation came, and everything flipped. It was supposed to be the peak. The moment I stood tall and said, I did it. The last few weeks were a blur: finals, college paperwork, party prep. The Millers were thrilled, already planning a small get-together. Even Chris, who never got excited about anything, was hyped. I remember waking up that morning like it was yesterday. My brain kept replaying everything it took to reach that day, from standing on the Millers' porch with just a duffel bag, to staying up all night cramming for finals, desperate to prove I could make it. My cap and gown were hanging on the door, freshly pressed. Susan had taped a handwritten note to the hanger. "So proud of you, Jake." I smiled when I saw it, not just at the note, but at everything it meant. They weren't just foster parents anymore. They were family. The ceremony was exactly what you'd expect: speeches, applause, a sea of names being called. But when they said mine, something shifted. As I crossed the stage and took my diploma, the world slowed. I could hear the Millers and Chris cheering like I just won the Super Bowl. And for that 1 second, I felt weightless. It was everything I'd hoped it would be. But, as always, real life didn't let that feeling last long. After the ceremony, we spilled outside for photos. The Millers were glowing with pride, and Chris cracked a joke about how my diploma probably came with a coupon for free ice cream. Even Lily showed up, which threw me off. She usually kept her distance. It all felt right. like the universe had finally aligned. Until I saw them. Martin and Denise. They stood off to the side, dressed like they'd just come back from another vacation. They scanned the crowd like they were searching for someone. Maybe me. At first, I thought I was seeing things. I hadn't laid eyes on them in years, and I definitely hadn't invited them. But there they were. Real. Present. I turned away, hoping they'd take the hint and leave. But Martin caught my eye. And once he did, he started walking toward me, pulling Denise along behind him. My chest tightened. My hands shook. Their smiles were too perfect, rehearsed, like they'd practiced them in front of a mirror. Jake. Denise said, way too cheerful for someone who abandoned their child. You look so grown up. Martin clapped a hand on my shoulder like we were just old friends catching up. We're so proud of you, son. This is a big day for all of us. All of us? That actually made me laugh. The nerve. I stared at them, caught somewhere between disbelief and fury. The Millers and Chris were nearby, watching, clearly unsure whether they should step in. What are you doing here? I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could, even though I was shaking inside. Martin answered like nothing was wrong. We came to celebrate. To be here for you. We've made mistakes, Denise added, her voice sticky sweet, but we've always wanted the best for you. I didn't respond. Not right away. My mind was racing, trying to decide whether to walk away, explode, or say something that might finally make them understand just how much damage they'd done. We've missed you so much, Denise said, her voice syrupy, like nothing had ever happened. We thought graduation would be the perfect time to reconnect. As a family. I stared them down. You don't get to call yourselves my family, I said, each word sharp and deliberate. You left me, dropped me off with strangers and never looked back. Didn't even check if I was okay. And now you just show up like you've been here the whole time. Denise's fake smile faltered. Martin flushed, and the cracks in their polished act started to show. That's not fair, Jake, Martin said, trying to keep his voice even. We did what we thought was best for everyone. I shook my head. No, you did what was best for you. Don't act like it was some noble sacrifice. You bailed. You went off to live your dream life, and I was left to survive. People nearby had started to notice. Tom and Susan stepped closer, their faces tight with concern and fury. But the real surprise was Lily. She walked straight up to them and said, You don't get to ruin this for him. Not today. You've already done enough. It was the first time I'd ever seen her stand up to them. And I swear, I'd never been prouder of her. Martin opened his mouth, but Denise grabbed his arm and whispered something about not causing a scene. They both looked at me one last time, faces caught between pity and annoyance, then turned and walked away. The Millers rushed in, hugging me like they could protect me from the fallout. This day's about you, Susan said, holding me close. Not them. Chris, always ready with sarcasm, handed me a tissue and muttered, Dude, you should charge them for emotional damage. I actually laughed. The rest of the day was a blur. We went back to the Miller's place, where the backyard was decked out with balloons, streamers, and too much food. And for those few hours, I let myself breathe. I pushed Martin and Denise out of my mind and focused on the people who had actually shown up. That night, after the guests left and the house fell quiet, I sat out on the porch with Lily. She turned to me and said, I'm sorry, Jake. For all of it. I didn't see it before, but you were right. They used us. They only ever cared about themselves. I didn't know what to say, so I just gave her a small nod. We sat there in silence, but it wasn't empty. It was the most connected we'd ever been. That day wasn't just about graduation. It was about drawing a line, choosing to let go of what hurt, and holding on to what healed. It wasn't easy, but it had to happen. Still, something about their sudden appearance didn't sit right with me. The way they just showed up, smiling like nothing had happened. It felt off. And unfortunately, I was right. A week after graduation, I got an email from Denise. For a second, I let myself hope it might be an apology. But I knew better. The message was long and drenched in half-truths and nostalgia. She talked about how hard things had been, how they'd made mistakes, but that their hearts had always been in the right place. Then came the real reason for writing. We hope we can move past this and reconnect as a family. You're doing so well. We're so proud of you. Maybe you could help us out a bit during this difficult time. Help them. After everything. It was so absurd, I almost laughed, but not in a funny way. More in that I want to punch something kind of way. I didn't write back. I didn't even finish reading. Just blocked her and deleted the message. But the anger stuck, lingering like a mosquito that wouldn't die. Lily, always watching now, started keeping tabs on them. I think it was part curiosity, part instinct to protect me. She began updating me here and there. Apparently, Martin and Denise had burned through their savings trying to keep up appearances with their fake travel influencer lifestyle. The blog flopped. The money dried up. Now they were broke, couch surfing and relying on handouts from distant relatives who were running out of patience. "They're a disaster," Lily said during one of our late-night calls. But the wild part? They still think you're the reason things fell apart. They seriously believe that if you just forgive them, everything would go back to normal. Forgive them? I snapped. They left me homeless when I was 10. Lily sighed, not defending them, just exhausted. I know. I'm not saying they're right. I'm just telling you what they're saying. I didn't celebrate their downfall, but I didn't feel sorry either. They made their choices. And now, they were living with the consequences. Meanwhile, I kept moving forward. Then something else happened, something I didn't expect. I got a notification from LinkedIn. Martin and Denise had found me again. They'd commented on a post I'd made about my scholarship. "We're so proud of you, Jake. Let's catch up soon." Almost word for word what they wrote under my graduation photo. I didn't even know they had LinkedIn accounts, let alone that they'd use them to try to worm their way back into my life. I blocked them again. But it didn't stop there. They started reaching out to people around me, professors, coworkers, even the Millers. Always the same story. Manipulative messages, guilt trips, twisted tales about how I had abandoned them. One of those emails actually reached my boss at the bookstore. She pulled me aside one day and said, "Hey, I don't mean to pry, but we got a strange message from someone claiming to be your parents." It sounded off. I was completely embarrassed. "I'm really sorry," I told my boss. "They're not part of my life anymore. I'll handle it." Thankfully, she didn't press. She just nodded and said, "If they reach out again, let me know. We've got your back." That simple line meant more than I could explain. But it also made something crystal clear. Martin and Denise weren't just invading my personal space anymore. They were trying to sabotage what I'd built. That's when Lily stepped in. She went public, made a bold post on social media and laid it all out. No sugarcoating, no dancing around it. She wrote about how our parents had abandoned both of us and never once taken responsibility. "Jake and I built our lives without their help," she wrote. "We don't owe them anything." The post blew up. Hundreds of likes, shares, supportive comments. Strangers validating what we'd lived through. It was healing, but it also poured gasoline on the fire. Martin and Denise responded by spiraling. They flooded the internet with their own dramatic sob stories, painting us as ungrateful kids who didn't appreciate all they'd sacrificed. It was a mess of guilt trips, warped memories, and flat-out lies. But the more they posted, the more obvious it became they were drowning and trying to drag us down with them. Then one day, Lily called, her voice buzzing with a weird kind of excitement. "Hey, remember that old storage unit they used to rent? They stopped paying for it, and the landlord let me grab a few things before everything got tossed." An hour later, she showed up at my door with a beat-up cardboard box like she was holding state secrets. "You need to see this," she said, dropping it on the kitchen table. Inside was a mess, old bills, foreclosure notices, collection agency letters. I started flipping through them, and my stomach turned. They were living way beyond their means, Lily muttered. Failed businesses, maxed out credit cards. They didn't even try to fix it. They just ran. Toward the bottom, I found a letter from a law office, some kind of financial restructuring plan. My eyes locked on a single line. Reducing dependence to minimize expenses. My name was listed. I was a line item, something to be cut to save money. I slammed the folder shut, hands trembling. "They didn't leave because they couldn't afford me," I said quietly. "They left because it was easier than facing the mess they made." Lily didn't say anything at first. Then, gently, "I thought you deserved to know." "Thanks," I murmured. After she left, I just sat there, staring at the box. I didn't know whether to burn it or keep it. In the end, I kept it, not for revenge, but as a reminder, a record of the truth. By the time I started college, their reputation had completely tanked. People were flagging their fundraisers as scams. Even the relatives they'd been mooching off finally kicked them out. According to Lily, they were living in their car now and still blaming me. I didn't feel sorry for them, not even a little. Meanwhile, I was thriving. College was everything I'd hoped it would be. I dove in. I even started running free financial literacy workshops on campus, just something small to give back. A way to pass on what the Millers had taught me about independence and building a life. Then, second semester, Lily called. "You're not going to believe this," she said, equal parts exasperated and shocked. They showed up at my apartment. My chest tightened. Are you okay? They were crying, begging me to convince you to talk to them. Said they were desperate. I sighed, rubbing my temples. What did you say? I told them to leave. Said if they came back, I'd call the cops. That hit different. The old Lily would have stayed quiet, kept her head down. But this Lily? She'd grown strong. She stood her ground. And in that moment, I realized I didn't owe Martin and Denise anything. Not my forgiveness. Not my help. Not even my attention. What I did owe was to myself, to protect the life I'd built, without them dragging shadows into it. But of course, they weren't finished. They never knew how to let go, especially when they thought they could still squeeze something out of you. That's when the calls started. Random numbers lighting up my phone at all hours. I ignored most of them. But one day, I slipped up and answered. It was Aunt Diane. I hadn't spoken to her in years. She didn't even say hello. Jake, what is wrong with you? She snapped. Excuse me. Your parents are homeless, living out of their car. And you're just pretending they don't exist? They're your family, Jake. You owe them something. A little kindness, at least. I clenched my jaw. The heat in my chest started to rise. Kindness. I repeated. Where was their kindness when they left me in a foster home and disappeared? When they never checked in? Never called? Never cared. She paused for a beat, then said sharply, they were doing what they thought was right. People make mistakes. You're being cold. Cold? Cold was sleeping in a stranger's house at 10 years old, wondering why your parents didn't want you. Cold was realizing you'd been discarded like a bill they didn't feel like paying. But I didn't say all that. Not then. I hung up. I wasn't going to waste another second explaining myself to someone who either didn't understand or didn't want to. And the truth was, I didn't owe her an explanation. Over the next few weeks, the calls kept coming. Distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly blew up my phone. Each one followed the same tired script. I was the selfish son, the cold-hearted one who'd abandoned his struggling parents. None of them got it. Martin and Denise weren't just flawed, they were toxic, manipulative, unwilling to take responsibility for any of the damage they caused. Helping them now would have been like diving back into a fire I'd already barely escaped. When guilt didn't work, they escalated. One morning, I checked my inbox and felt my stomach knot. Subject line, notice of intent to pursue financial support. I opened it, heart pounding. It was from a lawyer claiming to represent Martin and Denise. Buried under all the legal fluff was one absurd claim. They were threatening to sue me for financial abandonment. According to them, now that I was successful, I owed it to them to cover their expenses. Like I was some kind of human ATM. It was almost funny, almost. I mean, I wasn't rich. I was doing well, yeah, but I was still early in my career. And more importantly, they gave up their legal rights when they dumped me into foster care. I forwarded the email to a lawyer the Millers had connected me with. She called back almost instantly. They have no case, she said. Just intimidation tactics. Don't respond. Don't engage. I took her advice. Still, it left a bitter taste. That after everything, they still tried to flip the story. Still painted me as the villain in a narrative they wrote with their own cowardice. So I did what I always did when life got heavy. I worked. By then, the little campus workshop I'd started had grown into something bigger. What began as a small effort to teach students about money had become a full-blown nonprofit. We partnered with schools, community centers, even major companies. Each milestone felt like another mile between me and the broken boy they'd left behind. Then, out of nowhere, I got an email that stopped me cold. It was from a producer. She'd heard about my nonprofit through one of our partners and wanted to feature me in a docuseries about resilience. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready to share my full story, especially the parts that still stung. But after talking it through with the Millers and Lily, I realized maybe my story could help someone else. Maybe it didn't have to just be about pain. So I said yes. Filming was surreal. Sitting in front of cameras, walking back through everything. It pulled up more emotion than I expected. At one point, the crew asked if I wanted to talk about Martin and Denise. I thought about it. In the end, I kept it short. They made their choices, I said. And yeah, those choices shaped me. But they don't define me. What matters now is the life I've built, the people I call family, and the work I get to do. Later, during a break, the producer pulled me aside. Her face was careful, like she wasn't sure how I'd take what she had to say. Jake, she began gently, we found something during research. It's about your parents. Are you okay hearing it? I nodded. I didn't think they could surprise me anymore. Go ahead. She exhaled slowly. They were evicted, defaulted on several loans, and there may be fraud allegations tied to some of their businesses. It looks like they left town to avoid charges. I blinked. Fraud. The word felt heavy in my mouth. She nodded. Nothing huge, legally speaking. But there's a clear pattern. Bad credit activity, shady ventures, unpaid loans. They left a lot of people behind. And just like that, the anger came rushing back. They weren't just reckless. They weren't just selfish. They were dangerous. They were harming people, then running when the consequences came knocking. I clenched my jaw, trying to stay composed. The producer didn't press. She just gave me space. And surprisingly, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even sad. What I felt was clarity. Cold, hard clarity. Looks that way, the producer said softly. I just thought you should be aware, in case it ever comes up again. I gave a slow nod, even though my head was spinning. For the longest time, I thought their lies were personal, aimed directly at me. But hearing how many others they deceived, how wide the trail of damage really stretched, it confirmed what I'd always suspected deep down. They didn't leave because they had no choice. They left because it was easier. Abandoning me wasn't some isolated decision. It was just part of them cutting loose everything they didn't want to deal with. Everything they didn't want to fix. Everything that required effort, accountability, love. When the documentary finally aired, I didn't expect the reaction it got. My inbox filled with messages from people who'd lived through similar pain. Some thanked me. Some said it gave them hope. Others simply said, "Now I don't feel so alone." I hadn't realized how many people needed to hear it, needed to feel seen. It was humbling. I didn't feel like I'd done anything extraordinary. I was just telling the truth. But of course, Martin and Denise couldn't stay silent. The minute the documentary gained traction, they ran to social media with their usual theatrics. Over-the-top posts about how I'd twisted the story, how I'd made them out to be villains when they were the real victims. But this time, no one believed them. It backfired. Viewers called them out, dissecting their contradictions, exposing their deflections. The holes in their story were too big to ignore. And instead of earning sympathy, they just revealed themselves further. Their manipulation? It had finally lost its grip. While they spiraled online, I moved forward. I bought my first home, not flashy, just warm and quiet. A place that felt safe. A place that felt like mine. That first weekend, I invited the Millers and Lily over for dinner. Nothing fancy. Just food, laughter, old stories, and the kind of love you can't fake. It wasn't a milestone I celebrated with champagne or speeches. It was better than that. It was real. Lily was thriving too. She graduated, started her career, and finally stepped out from under the shadow Martin and Denise had cast for so long. Seeing her smile with that quiet confidence, that was one of the most satisfying parts of this entire journey. And me? I don't regret a single choice I made. Cutting ties with them wasn't easy, but it was necessary for my peace, for my growth, for the life I wanted to build. My success didn't come from them. It came from the people who actually showed up, the ones who stood by me, the ones who helped me heal, who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. The Millers, Lily, my mentors, my friends. They were my family. Not the ones who gave me their last name, but the ones who gave me their time, their trust, their hearts. Because in the end, that's what family really is. Not blood, not biology. Family is who shows up when everything's falling apart. Who stays, even when it's hard. Who helps you become someone you're proud to be. And the family I chose? They were everything I ever needed and more.